Hello and welcome to Behind the Bearcat. This is the podcast where the Northwest Missouri State University Career Services Office chats with Northwest faculty, staff, students, alumni, and friends, hear about their career journeys, how they got to where they are, and how they became Bearcats. I'm Northwest Internship Coordinator Travis Klein.
And I'm the Assistant Director of Career Services, Hannah Christian. And on today's podcast, we have a previous Bearcat who graduated with a degree in broadcasting with a minor in geography, who then went on to get a JD from UC Irvine. He is a commercial real estate attorney, and we are super happy to have him on this podcast as a guest. Welcome, Tracey Steele.
It's great to be here. Thank you.
I have to be my own audience, and that makes me feel kind of funny, but welcome, Tracey.
Thanks. Thank you.
So,
let me jump in and just say, not a former Bearcat. I think the saying is
present
once a Bearcat, always a Bearcat.
Always a Bearcat. That's right. Yeah.
You might have to fix that, Travis.
Distinguished Bearcat. Yeah.
That was a great catch.
Yeah.
Okay, so my first question, I just really love this question, is Tracey, what was your very first job?
My very first job, I would have to say it was mowing yards as maybe a 12-year-old. I don't know when I started mowing yards for a few bucks in the summer. And then that expanded a little bit. I got a couple of gigs mowing like cemeteries, doing that kind of work in the summers. My first job with a paycheck, I think, was at a feed store in my hometown. I'm from Grant City, Missouri. So
the thriving metropolis of Grant City.
That's right. Yeah, I'm not sure what the latest population numbers are, but when I graduated from high school, the population was 990. My high school class had 30 kids in it. So, one of those really small, rural Northwest Missouri towns. And I worked at the feed store in town, schlepping bags of, 50 pounds of whatever,
onto the truck. Yeah,
exactly. So that was a good job. Made me a few bucks. In high school, I had a lot of little odd jobs. I worked at the nursing home, doing janitorial work on weekends. I was a waiter at the steakhouse at the sale barn. Again, one of those really small town kind of phenomenon. There was a sale barn where livestock is sold, and there was a little cafe in there, and someone got the idea that they were going to upgrade it from a cafe to a steakhouse and serve a little more expensive food that probably was a little pricey for Grant City. It didn't last too long, but the food was fantastic and it was a fun job. I did a little bit of everything in high school. And
so you were involved in that vertical completely. You threw the feed on the truck, and then they butchered the cow, and then you fed it to them.
Yeah, that's right. So I definitely, I was part of that whole cycle for sure.
So how did you get to Northwest? Tell us. I mean, you're from Grant City, which is not far from here. But right. Why did you choose Northwest, and why did you choose broadcasting as a major?
So the two decisions were very much related. My senior year of high school, I was still trying to figure out, what am I going to do when I grow up? What's my major going to be in college? And I was struggling with it. I didn't have any clear direction. The one thing I knew I didn't want to do was to be a farmer. I wanted to get out of Grant City and see the world and do some different things. Took one of those career evaluation, survey things. And it kind of showed me that a lot of my interests were really aligned with broadcasting. I was interested in politics. I was interested in current events. I was interested in sports. And, being a broadcaster gives you an opportunity to have a taste of all of that, to play a role in those processes. And at the same time, I was trying to figure out where am I going to go to school. And sure, money was a factor in that. Came from a comfortable family, but certainly not wealthy. And I had the good fortune of accumulating some scholarship money at Northwest over the years in high school through, the Science Olympiad and some other events in high school. So Northwest was a really smart choice for me in terms of finances. And then once I started to think about broadcasting as a serious idea for my major, and I looked at the program at Northwest, I realized that they had a great program, and I had the choice between Northwest and Mizzou. Realistically, those were the two options, and I came to the realization that if I go to Mizzou, I'll have a very well-known reputation behind my school, but I'm probably not going to get the kind of hands-on experience that was being offered at Northwest. At Northwest, it was, you'll have an opportunity to jump in your very first semester, and you'll be producing, radio programs and television programs, and it will be hands-on, and you won't have to stand in line, and you won't be a number, just a face in the crowd. You'll have a chance to really get some good hands-on experience. And for all of those reasons kind of combined, Northwest made a lot of sense. So that's where I went, and I'm really glad I did. It was a good choice for me.
Yeah, that's my background too. I was a radio person as well here. So what were you involved with when you started at Northwest? Were you on the radio side, the TV side? Did you do a little bit of both?
Both, yeah. I did a little bit of everything. Back then, the student station was KDLX. I think the name has changed a little bit now. Mm-hmm. I was, one semester I was sports director, another semester I was news director. I was station manager for a semester. In fact, President Jasinski was our advisor, and he and I worked, I think, in maybe the early days of the process of converting the station from cable broadcasting to an actual over-the-air station. And obviously that took quite some time, and I wasn't around for the end of the process, but I think I was involved in the start. So I did a lot of work on the radio side, also worked at KXCV for several semesters, and really enjoyed my time there too, in a little bit more of a professional setting. But I also did a lot of work on the TV side, hosted parades, and did basketball games and football games. And in addition to that, I also managed to snag a couple of gigs doing radio for a couple of the area stations. I did high school games for CAN out of Bethany and KNIM there in Maryville. So I got quite a bit of experience doing radio work during college. The 92 presidential election, we heard that KQTV was looking for just some bodies to come down and help, run results from the newsroom to the studio or whatever. And so I jumped at the chance to do that. And, late at night when defenses were down, I snuck into the news director's office and asked him if I could get an internship in the spring. And he said, sure. So I started working there in the spring of '93. And when my internship hours were exhausted, he just started paying me. I started working part-time, and then started doing the weekend sports. And then even before I got out of school, I was anchoring. I think at that point I was anchoring the weekend news. They moved me from sports to news, and I was reporting a couple of days during the week, kind of taking a part-time schedule to finish up my hours at Northwest. So
I think that's a key point that we haven't heard from too many other people, but people try to figure out, like, how do I get an internship? Students come in and ask us this all the time, and there are lots of different ways to get an internship. But I think that's a really good example of, you get an internship when you see that opportunity, whether it's, hey, I can slip in and just talk to this person, or I can volunteer and then, kind of build a relationship and get in there. But the ones who find internships the fastest are sometimes the ones who just make those opportunities and then, take that initiative to go in and carpe that diem.
Right. And, I was lucky to have the opportunity, that opening to be able to go in. And I think, I worked really hard that night. I wanted to make sure that, I did everything exactly the way that they asked us to do it. And then, the news director was a really nice guy, so it made it easy, but it was definitely my plan for that night. I mean, I wasn't going to, to get the 6 hours of $5 an hour or whatever it was they paid us. It was, I was there to try to parlay that into something more. And
it transitioned well for you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. It's in a small market like that, any warm body is appreciated. So unlike an internship at a TV station in Kansas City, for example, I was doing work on the air as an intern. They, here, go cover this, go put a story together and we'll put it on the air if it's not terrible. And some of them were pretty terrible. I definitely was learning on the job, but it was, I was able to give them a hand at a really low cost, and that was something that they appreciated. And I think up until that point, there had been maybe some Northwest students who went to that station, but I don't think people had figured out that was an opportunity. And after I worked there that spring and then continued to work on after that, I was still working there in the summer. There were maybe a half dozen Northwest students who got internships there in the summer. And that happened to be the summer of the flood of 1993, which was by far the biggest news event that had happened in Northwest Missouri, to that point in decades. And all of them were on the air all the time. I mean, we were all just driving, hundreds of miles a day because there was more news than could possibly ever be covered. So then everybody got all of this great experience, and it worked out really well for the station and for us.
Yeah, I was there in the late 90s, early 2000s at Northwest, and there were several of the TV students who did stuff for KQ2, not just as interns, but I remember there was one of my classmates, he did the morning show, he produced it, so he'd get up at 4 a.m, drive to St. Joe, do the morning show, then come take classes all day. And so you opened a door that continues, I think, to this day to be used. So thank you for that.
Great.
I'll speak for them and say thank you.
That's awesome. I didn't do anything special there. It was very much self-serving, but I think especially a lot of the kids who come to Northwest from, bigger cities, that's where they think that they want to work. And so that's where they think they want to do their internship. And certainly there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with, doing an internship at one of the Kansas City stations or, in Omaha or Des Moines or whatever, but you're just not going to get the same kind of experience, the same kind of, hands-on work where you can actually. So in television news, you're always looking for the next job, and to get the next job, you're putting together a tape. It's a system that's not unlike baseball with the minor leagues. You have to work your way up from the bottom of the ladder to the top, and you start in a small market and you put together a tape that shows that you know what you're doing, and then you get the job at the next market, next tier of the market system. And if you do an internship in Kansas City, you might be able to fake a story or two using video that was shot for someone else, but you're not actually doing the work. It's not your work, and it's not as effective and beneficial. So it worked out well for me. I worked at that station for a couple of years, and then went from doing on-air work. I was anchoring the weekend news. I had also anchored the morning news. And by the way, hearing that there's a producer there was no producer when I was anchoring the morning news there. It was me. And, I was writing and, taping the scripts together for the teleprompter and, editing the video, doing basically everything. So that's pretty cool that they now have producers for the morning news.
They did then. I don't
But
know now, but yeah.
yeah, right. I went from there to a station in Toledo, Ohio as a producer. So I moved from an on-air position to off-air. I was impatient. I was just really itching to get to a bigger market. And I saw, I saw an opportunity. I saw that I could jump markets more quickly as a producer than I could as a reporter or an anchor. So that's what I did. And then I ended up finding a job with a station that was in the process of being purchased by the ABC network. So I was able to move into an O&O station, and then after a couple of years there, jumped to their station in Houston. And I spent 9 years in Houston at the ABC-owned station there. And that
still producing?
Right, yeah, producing the news, at various times, the mornings, the weekends, the 6 p.m., the 10 p.m., did a little bit of everything there. Did that for 9 years. And then, I was getting itchy. I wanted to do something different. Thought that it was time for me to try to dip my feet into being in management. And I got a job as an executive producer at Channel 9 in Kansas City, KMBC. And I did that for 3 years. And then at the end of that contract, I decided to try law school. So that's how I ended up at UC Irvine.
So quick question for you, Tracey. Only non-broadcasting major here. What's the difference between producing and then being an executive producer?
Your paycheck.
The executive producer, well, that's part of it for sure. The executive producer is the manager. In an ideal situation, you'll have a team of producers and writers. A lot of stations, basically every station have trimmed their ranks down, so that's not always true anymore. But kind of in the old school framework, you would have an executive producer managing a shift of producers and associate producers and news writers, and the executive producer is leading the news coverage for that day part, basically. And their boss would be the news director. Depending on the station, they might have an assistant news director as well in the chain of command. But basically, the executive producer is I guess, similar to the editor of the newscast for that, that day part, to compare it to a newspaper situation. And the news director would be the editor in chief. The executive producer is, responsible for everything. You're trying to keep an eye on every script, make sure that no factual errors are getting through, that the stories you're covering are the correct stories to be working on for that day, and that the general kind of type of coverage that you're doing fits with your strategy, that what you're looking to do. I was on the morning news at KMBC, so morning news is a little different from all of the other times of the day, because you're more of a hybrid between hard news and a little bit more infotainment. You're trying to do some stories that appeal to families, and maybe some entertainment type news and that sort of thing. And you're really focused on weather and traffic, and it's you have goals of trying to keep viewers for maybe an extra 15 minutes by pulling them through to the weather in the next segment. And that's part of producing a newscast in general, but in the morning it's especially challenging, because people are on their own schedules. They're trying to get to work, so you're trying to give them the information they need, but you're also trying to get them to stick around as long as you can.
Did you also hire the producers or the associate producers then?
Yeah. I was involved in going through the tapes and the resumes and doing interviews, and then kind of taking it to the news director and saying, this is who I think we should hire. And so yeah, for the morning news, I was basically in charge. And for better or for worse. You know, if it worked out well, it was to my benefit, but if something went wrong, it was, you know, it was definitely my responsibility.
So any insight, I mean, we just had a student last fall who worked in our office who had an internship in Kansas City, and I think wants to work in that environment. Do you have any insight, since you hired people for that industry, what students can do to help themselves out?
Sure. The first thing that comes to mind maybe isn't as applicable to this student because they've already had their internship, but there are good interns, and then there are the rest of the interns, and the good ones are proactive, right? They don't give you the chance to forget that they're there. As an executive producer, the last thing that was on my mind was making sure that the interns were, you know, fed and happy. They were there, but unless they were really in my face and just, you know, proactive and taking charge and doing the, you know, going above and beyond, I would forget that they existed, because on a day-to-day basis, you just don't have time to worry about that. And I think knowing that is really beneficial for an intern. From the intern's perspective, this is a really cool opportunity, right? You think, you know, I've made it. This is the big time. I'm working, you know, in a mid-major market TV station. I'm right here with all these people who I've been watching on TV for years. And it's easy to just kind of sit back and watch. And that's not a beneficial experience, really. But if you can figure out ways that you can make yourself useful, and then all of a sudden you're not just the intern, you're Janet. This woman is on the ball. She knows what she's doing. She's someone we can depend on and ask to do real work. And at the end of the summer or the end of the semester, when you know, when it comes time not just to evaluate, but also to provide letters of recommendation, that's someone who's going to stand out. And, you know, as an executive producer, that's someone who I would make an effort to help, you know, not just, you know, kind of provide a pro forma letter, but to, you know, pick up the phone and talk to a friend at another station and say, hey, this is someone you should look at.
Yeah,
so
that's huge.
You know, that's the
that's
first
huge.
thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, as an intern, that's really what your goal should be. That's why you're there, is to make those connections, to develop that network and develop a reputation that is going to be beneficial for the rest of your career. After the internship, while you're still, you know, looking for work, it's, you know, that's tough. And that's where you really need to have that network. And this is true in every field, but I think in TV, especially, if you're waiting to see the job listings show up, that's, you know, that's probably not going to work out well for you. And I think a lot of people will, you know, they'll put together a package of like 200 tapes and resumes and just send them out to every newsroom. And that's not effective either, because no one has the time to sit there and watch, you know, an unsolicited tape from, you know, somewhere in the middle of Missouri. You know, that's not the way that they, you know, they don't have time for that. They really don't. But what is effective is developing that network and then getting your contact to set up an introduction, and, you know, have them call their friend, the executive producer at, you know, WXYZ or whatever, and say, hey, this kid is really smart and she is really aggressive, and I think you should look at her for, you know, any opportunity you have. I think she's ready to be hired to do, you know, blank. And then when you send the tape and the resume, they'll actually look at it. And if you don't have that kind of network, then that's what you should be focused on developing. Setting up just informational interviews wherever you can, just leveraging every bit of help that you can get, basically.
That's super good insight, because I think sometimes that's a little the flipped, I'm just going to send all this out, and that's kind of, I guess, intuitively, this is good stuff or whatever. They don't realize, they don't have that perspective of the person who's really busy, and this is kind of, I don't have the time for that. That's really good insight, especially for students.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, I think, yeah, thank you. I think, the modern era too, the broadcasting industry has changed dramatically even since I left in 2009. And most of the changes have been, to cut staffing even more. And that means everybody's stretched even, more thinly.
Even thinner.
And yeah, there's just not an opportunity for anyone to really be spending a lot of time looking at unsolicited tapes and resumes. It's just, everybody's just trying to hold on and, keep your head above water because you don't have enough people to get the job done as it is.
So, all right, let's talk about law school.
Mm-hmm.
So you're executive producing in Kansas City. What made you want to go to law school? What was that thought process?
You must have been a much better student in common law than I ever was. So.
It was a lot of fun.
Shout out to Fred.
Absolutely.
That's right. I love taking classes with Fred, so that was one of my favorite for sure. Law was something that I'd always kind of had in the back of my mind. I was frustrated with just kind of the day-to-day frustration from work. It was a little bit of a grind, especially on the morning shift. And I'd been working mornings off and on for, at that point, 12 years or so. And if you've ever worked that kind of overnight shift where you're getting up at midnight and going into work, it wears on you. So, I was at the end of my contract, and I had actually taken the LSAT while I was in Houston when I was trying to figure out what I was going to do then. And, I had taken it, I had a pretty good score, and those scores, I believe, last 5 years. So, it was sitting there in my back pocket, and it was, on the verge of expiring, and the timing seemed right. So I started looking, started applying, just kind of to see what would happen. Did a little bit of investigating and, figured out the type of school that I could expect to get into with my grades and my LSAT score. And then one night I was at work, just scrolling through the wires, looking for interesting stories to add into the newscast. And I see this little blurb about a new law school in California that was just about to open, and as a way to make a splash, they were giving scholarships to their entire first class, and full scholarships, full tuition for 3 years. And that obviously sounded pretty interesting to someone in my position. I had 2 kids, and didn't really want to take on a bunch of debt. So I dug in and liked what I saw. So I applied there, and that was one of the schools that accepted me. So that was actually the only visit that I made to an out-of-state school was to UC Irvine. I was very interested in it. And then for their admitted students weekend, and they did a great job of selling us on the school and the community and the idea of this, this school that didn't even exist yet. They were in the process of building the law library and putting in classrooms and the education building, for the law school. And there are some internet forums for prospective law students, and they tend to get pretty snarky. And the general consensus was, you're an idiot if you go to UCI. Why would you take that risk? Why would you, of all the options out there, why would you go to this school? It's not ranked, it's not accredited, it doesn't even exist yet. Why would you do that? So there were about 60 of us who were in that first class, and it was it very much felt like us against the world kind of situation, and it created a really close family type bond between the students, and it ended up being a great fit for me, and I was lucky to have the chance to be a part of it.
Wow, that's incredible.
Yeah, it worked out really well, and the goal from day one was, we're going to be a top 20 school, and everybody laughed at that. And they're not quite top 20 yet, but I think they are in the top 25, which is unheard of. No one's ever started
For such a young school. Yeah. Wow. So, okay. So you do commercial real estate transactions, or you're kind of a transactional guy. When you're in law school, so what type of experiences did you have in law school, or did you know that's what you wanted to do, or how did you develop this sort of path? No. So law school is still very much influenced by, the old kind of Harvard model, where everything is taught by case study. So you read opinions which are written by appellate judges about cases, and that's how you learn about the various legal kind of principles. And that's all coming from a litigation kind of point of view. That's all, that all of the opinions, of course, are about cases that have been litigated. So your focus is 100% on the side of litigation. And then when you start looking for a job, you realize that most legal jobs do not involve litigation. That's not where the money is. The money is on the transactional side, because clients would much rather spend, money on a lawyer to help get a new deal done rather than to fight about an old deal. You only go to litigation if you, as a last resort, basically. So while I was in law school, I had an opportunity for a summer position at a large firm with an LA office in my second summer, and went through their summer program and had a great time, learned a lot. And at the end of the summer, they offered me a position in their global project finance group, which is a purely transactional practice. Essentially, you're representing either banks or developers of alternative energy projects. That's what that work entailed. So when I went to law school, I thought I was going to be Atticus Finch. That's what I had in mind. I grew up in this tiny little town in rural Missouri, and I thought that's what it meant to be a lawyer. You're like you're kind of helping people in your town to, defend them against cases or, whatever, criminal or civil cases. But absolutely, my focus had been on doing litigation work. And that's what I had expressed when I went for that job as my interest, but that wasn't what they had available for me. And so they offered me this transactional job. And I was in a position where I either say yes to a guaranteed job when I graduate paying a lot of money, or I say no thanks and then just roll the dice that I figure out something else. So of course I said yes. And turns out it was a lot of fun. It was really interesting. It has a lot of advantages and fits my personality, I think, in a lot of ways. It's doing transactional work is much more collaborative than litigation. Litigation is very adversarial. You're fighting with a kind of a zero-sum situation. There's a winner and a loser unless you settle. But the idea of settling, negotiating a settlement only comes in at the end. Up until that point, you're fighting tooth and nail to win, because otherwise you don't have any leverage in the settlement negotiation, right? So you're very adversarial. In a transactional practice, you're fighting for your client's best interest, but their interest is in getting the deal done. And if you are too adversarial, the deal won't get done. You have to find ways to collaborate with the other side and make it so both sides win. And that
that's very appealing to me, and I enjoy that part of my work very much.
Oh, wow. So any tips for maybe mid-career professionals? So I went back to grad school after I had worked for 7 years, and it was, I had to take the GRE or the LSAT, kind of out when you're living life. You have to go take this test. And I was like, I'm going to fail because I haven't taken a test in 7 years. So I kind of get that. But do you have any tips and tricks for maybe if you're a mid-career professional who's going to have to go back to school or wants to go back to school to maybe change careers?
So if you have the luxury of making this choice, if you're in a position where you have a job and it's not an emergency or a situation where, you were laid off and this is the best thing that you've been able to figure out to do next. If you have the luxury of planning ahead, then, put aside some extra money, do a ton of research, understand, what it is you're getting into, what the best fit is for you. And, in a situation where you're going back to school, is the best fit to go to the best school, the most highly ranked school, or is it to go to a school where maybe you can get some scholarship help, or maybe has a lower tuition, or maybe has a better fit in the market where you want to live? I know, especially from the law school perspective, the focus is always on go to the best school you can get into. The best school is going to give you the best job, which gives you the best, earning potential. But the reality is most lawyers don't end up working for the largest firms. And as a result, it doesn't matter as much what school they went to. If you're not working for one of the big firms, then you're not competing on that level. Instead, you're looking for a job in the city where you want to work, doing the type of work that you want to do. And those types of firms tend to hire from, local schools. So let's say you wanted to work in Denver. It doesn't, you could go to Harvard and get a job in Denver. Sure, they would love to hire Harvard grads, but the reality is most of the people they hire probably go to, University of Colorado, or, I'm not sure, I just pulled that name out of nowhere without doing research, but I'm sure that they're not hiring, from the Ivy League for most of the kind of mid-level jobs in a city like that. So trying to be more strategic about the choices that you make, and that's only possible if you take the time to do the research and to really dig into the situation.
I always find it interesting, when I talk to other folks who were broadcasting majors, a lot of us, we don't stay in the industry to retirement. We do switch careers partway through. So I always like to ask, what skills, when you were a producer for a television station, what skills in that position do you use now as a real estate, as a transactional real estate lawyer? What are those skills that have transferred over for you?
So as a television producer, I was essentially a professional writer. That's, I wrote a ton of content every day. It came in the form of 20-second scripts for the anchors to read, but I was writing a lot of words every day and on a lot of different subjects. So I developed skills in the way of writing in really short, declarative sentences, very clean, not a lot of adjectives kind of cluttering up the content, right? When you're writing for broadcast, you're trying to just get the point across as cleanly as you can. And it turns out that's the way you write for legal purposes as well. So that translated very well for me. And I think also the work that I did in TV, where I I would have to feel like I was a little bit of an expert on whatever I was writing about. So you have to be able to process a lot of information pretty quickly. And that definitely comes in handy as a lawyer, because a lawyer, especially in transactional work, is, you're trying to translate the practical realities of whatever the deal is about into legal terms. So you have to be able to understand, for instance, if it's a purchase contract for a piece of land for a fast food restaurant, you have to know a little bit about how fast food restaurants work to understand what your client needs. What's important in terms of frontage access, and what are you going to need in terms of like utilities and visibility of your signs, all of these very specific but very important aspects of the business has nothing to do with the law, right? There's nothing in the common law about this stuff, but you have to understand what your client needs so you can negotiate the deal and make sure that the language in the contract reflects that. And I think my work in TV really prepared me to be able to do that and to have the flexibility of being able to handle, a transaction involving just about anything.
So, Tracey, after we hear your story here, we're going to go back to Northwest. And one of the things that I have started asking everybody that we've had as a guest on our show is, what does it mean to you to be a Bearcat?
I think the first word that comes to my mind is family. Northwest was, it was a great fit for me coming from a small town, a tiny high school. Northwest was big enough that I had every opportunity that I needed to learn. I could explore all aspects of broadcasting. There, radio, television, digital production, but I was able to do it in a situation where I knew everyone. I knew everyone in the program, and it felt like home. It felt like a place where I was welcome and nurturing, and just really comfortable. So to me, that's what being a Bearcat is about. It's finding that kind of sweet spot between, the schools that are just enormous and where it's easy to get lost in the crowd, and someplace that's too small to really give you the opportunities to do the things that you need to develop.
All right. If we happen to have, we've also been asking, if we happen to have, any current students who want to reach out to you or ask you, further questions about anything, is there a way that they can contact you?
Oh, sure. And I'm happy to talk to anyone. Probably the easiest way to do that would be to send me an email. My personal email is traceysteele.kc@gmail.com. It's just my name, TRACEYSTEELE.KC, like Kansas City, @gmail.com. I'm also on Twitter, and of course, someone could reach out to me through there. I think my handle is just @TraceySteele. And yeah, look me up. I'm actually in the process of starting a new job at a firm called Freeman & Smiley. So my bio will be up on their website probably by the time this podcast is released. So you can find my email at work and phone number there as well.
And it will still be a commercial real estate or a transactional position, this new position?
Yeah, same type of work. I'm really excited. It's a little bit smaller firm than the one I had been working for previously, and I think it's going to be a great opportunity.
All right. So at the end of each podcast as well, I'd like to give you the opportunity to just say anything that you want to say, Tracey. Leave us with some good nuggets of wisdom.
I think these are really strange times, and I know that a lot of folks are going through difficult times as a result of the pandemic and the way it has affected the way we live our lives. And I guess all I would say is, stick to your plan. This will pass. Stay safe, but also stay optimistic, because, once we get a handle on this and things, turn back to whatever normal ends up being when we're through this, there's going to be a lot of opportunity. There's a lot of business out there that is kind of on the sidelines, waiting to see what happens and waiting for this all to shake out. And once it does, I think folks are going to have a chance to really, try a lot of new things. We're in a stage, I think, where we're transitioning from, the old economy to a new, more digital, more virtual based economy. And I think a lot of the lessons that we've learned from the past 8 months or so are going to show us a new way of living our lives, and especially doing business in this world. And so it's been a tough time, but it's also a time that is going to be full of opportunity really soon. So I think just try to be ready for that.
Awesome. Yeah, that was really great. All right. Well, thank you, Tracey.
Yeah, thank you.
Guys, thank you very much. I really enjoyed it.
All right, well, that'll do it for another episode of Behind the Bearcat, and we'll talk to you next time. Hey, guys, we hope you enjoyed that episode. Don't forget to follow on your podcast platform of choice and on YouTube. Also, click the little notification bell on YouTube so you never miss an upload. And you can follow us on social media on Twitter, Instagram, and we have a LinkedIn page.